Hi everyone, I am Ajinkya Patil. As you know, the housing market was already crazy, but it just got even crazier. House prices increased by a whooping 20% year on year in the second quarter of 2021, building up on already accelerating trend in increasing house prices for quite some time. The supply of houses in the market is now historically low, causing house prices to skyrocket. It's not the cities like Amsterdam anymore that are leading the pack. It's the regions you may not have imagined. The prices increased by 30% in another parts of the country like Groningen. This is because although big cities remain still popular, home buyers are willing to go further away to find something more affordable. So how did we get here? How did the housing market get so completely crazy? Why did it happen and what can you do if you have to buy a house in this current market? As we just saw, the generic tips like trying to find a house outside a big city aren't working anymore. So stay with me for some specific and useful tips. Madness in the housing market is breaking records. Bidding 100,000 more than the asking price is now becoming a rule rather than an exception. At this point, it won't surprise me anymore if someone puts an abandoned shed on Funda and desperate home buyers rush in to overbid more than enough to cover my 1 year salary. Close to a million young people in their 20s and 30s now still have to live with their parents. Soon the only option will be to retire in your parents' basement. Especially the first time home buyers have nowhere to go. The housing prices are crazy high, while the shortage of housing had already led to high rental prices. Even renting in the social sector is no more an option, as the waiting list in some of the cities is as long as 17 years. Now I see where all this is headed. At some point, the home buyers are going to realize that there is no point competing and overbidding against each other. They are going to revolt against the homeowners, and there might very well be a war between the first-time home buyers and already homeowners. So how did we get here? And before we dive into that, I would like to take a moment to thank you, that is all my viewers. 2 years ago, when I bought my home, I wanted to become a financial advisor. However, the regulations in the industry require that you are knowledgeable by showing that you pass certain exams, but that you are also suitable to start a business. And suitability means, in this case, that you have worked for another financial advisor for 10 years. What an open market, right? Earlier this year, having watched enough of YouTube myself through the coronavirus pandemic, I decided to start this channel. And today, 11 videos later, we have a subscribers community of 250 and you have watched 500 hours of my content. When I saw that number, I turned towards my trusted source of statistics, that is the Central Bureau of Statistics, to put things into perspective, because you know we love numbers and statistics on this channel. And you are quite familiar with CBS by now because I show tens of their plots in each of my video. To my disappointment, the CBS doesn't maintain any statistics on films, so I had to turn towards IMDb. And apparently an average film nowadays is about 100 minutes long. So watching 500 hours is like watching 300 movies. So I would like to thank you for your interest and spending that time with me. And I would love to hear your suggestions in the comments below. Alright, now back to the story of how did we get here for the housing market to go so completely crazy. Here is what happened. The first thing that happened is that the population grew. Now that might sound a little strange. The population in a country like the Netherlands doesn't just suddenly burst. Our trusted source, the CBS, of course maintains a good prediction of the population growth based on births and deaths in the country. However, there are two trends that they got completely wrong. The first one is the immigrants coming to the Netherlands, which they highly underestimated. In 2010, the CBS made a prediction that the population of the Netherlands will be 17.8 million by 2040. And based on that, the plans were made not to build houses too fast. However, today they realize that number will be more like 19 million. There is a second trend that has been developing. Each household is getting smaller. Nowadays, an average household is only 2.1 persons. Growing population divided into smaller households. You do the math, we need more houses. And you know, when there is more demand for something, while the supply is limited, the prices increase. The second thing that happened is the 2008 crisis. During the crisis, about 5,000 construction companies either went bankrupt or had to stop. About 40% of 500,000 workforce in the construction industry had to find jobs somewhere else. That meant after the crisis, when the demand started to pick up, we had a shortage of workers. The same story also for building materials. Things only got worse in the coronavirus pandemic. The whole supply chain of building materials got disturbed and we got even bigger shortages. And you know, when there is a shortage, while the demand is growing, the prices have to increase. If it is expensive to build a house, it's expensive to buy one or to rent one for that matter. The third thing that influenced the housing market is government policies. There have been many policies that went completely wrong, although there were good intentions behind them. The first one of those policies is the Verhuurderheffing, which is a tax on landlords. It was introduced in 2013 for landlords that had at least 10 properties, and nowadays it's changed to 50 properties. That tax meant, of course, the rents went up, but beyond that, it also affected non-profit housing corporations. Now, these corporations, because of that extra tax, had less money to invest in new construction projects, contributing to a housing shortage. Then the policies around nitrogen emission and PFAS. You might remember in 2019 when the Dutch farmers decided to take things in their own hands and protest innovatively. They took their tractors to highways and to public places. That was the protest against government's policies to reduce the nitrogen emission. It was the same policies that also led to fewer construction permits for new houses. Exactly when we needed more houses to meet the shortage. Fewer construction permits contributed to shortage of land to build on, raising land prices and in the end house prices. Today, a new construction home on average costs more than 400,000, while half of the buyers are looking for something around 250,000. The third policy influencing the housing market is first the reduction and now the scrapping of the property transfer tax. Many first-time home buyers may not know this, but the Netherlands used to have a 6% property transfer tax. It was reduced to 2% in 2011, which was supposed to be a short-term measure to give a boost to the housing market after the crisis. The government never increased this tax back to 6% after the market recovered. Instead, they decided to scrap the tax altogether for houses up to 400,000 in 2021, with the hope that it would help starters to buy a house in this crazy market. In practice, of course, what would happen is that create more competition among the buyers, and the sellers would compensate that tax discount now in their selling prices by increasing them, and that's how contributing to even higher housing prices. Another such policy is the tax deduction on mortgage interest. Tax deductions are supposed to make homeownership attractive. However, in reality, they don't really lead to your lower monthly mortgage payments. That's because of the tax benefits, people are willing to pay more for a house. If everyone is willing to pay more for a house, that drives the house prices higher. What it means in the end is that you pay more for the same house. The last and the most obvious factor that has influenced the housing market is the historically low interest rates. In my other video, I gave an example that if the interest rates reduce by 1%, the house prices can rise as much as 20% while keeping the monthly payments the same, again increasing the house prices. Alright, you might say it's all great to understand how we got here, but what's important is to know how do I survive and win in this market as a home buyer. So here are some tips. First, buy long term. While the house prices are historically high, I know it is frustrating and it is natural to think that it might be better to wait for the market to cool down. However, as I discussed in my other video, the drivers behind the high valuations of houses may continue to exist for quite some time. And given that we cannot predict the future and cannot time the market for a fall, it might not be a wise idea to wait for the market to cool down. Instead, we need to think long term. On a long term, the house prices always appreciate. By buying long term, you can ride out on these short term waves of ups and downs. Second, get a fair deal. Getting a good deal in this market by buying a house that is below its market value is incredibly hard. What we should try for instead is to get a fair deal by doing the two following things. First, by estimating the fair market value of a house. In this market with crazy overbidding, we have to especially be careful not to get a bad deal, because we need to find something that we can call a home for a long term. And yes, that will mean that you might lose some of the nice looking houses, but with patience, you will find a good deal. Check out my other video on how to find market value of a house. And secondly, by doing our due diligence, such as technical inspection, researching the neighborhood, talking to the neighbors, and so on. Third, get a good deal on your mortgage. Although we cannot control the high valuations of houses, we can still control our monthly mortgage expenses by getting a good deal on our mortgage. For example, a low interest rate mortgage can save us tens of thousands of euros over a long term, compensating for those higher house prices. With that, I would like to wish success to all the home buyers. If you liked my video, hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. I would love to hear from you in the comments below, and in the meantime, check out some of my other videos.